My name is Heather Alexandra, and today we're going to talk about how Breath of the Wild's world is so goddamn magical. And before we begin, consider this your spoiler warning. I'm not going to talk about major plot points, but in order for me to talk about the vast, awesome open world, I need to tell you about a couple of the awesome things that I found. So if you don't want to know anything, now's your chance to turn back, but otherwise, let's begin. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild feels like this watershed moment for the series, and maybe even for games as a whole. It forgoes the heavy authorship found in a lot of other video games, and allows players an immense amount of freedom right from the start of the game. After an opening tutorial section, you're basically free to go wherever you want. You can even go right to the final boss if you feel brave enough, and believe me, you should feel a little bit of intimidation at that prospect. I've tried it. It is very, very hard. Maybe, just maybe, you want to put on a shirt and get a sword before you try and fight Ganon. Much is going to be said about how the structure of this game recalls the original NES game, where unguided exploration was a key component to making that game's world feel so large and wondrous. This is a really astute comparison, and it's readily apparent that Breath of the Wild's success doesn't come from a lack of structure. The game is impeccably crafted. The success of the game comes from a lack of guidance. The game does offer a critical path with 4 main dungeons, but it hardly ever encourages you to head down that path. It sort of shows you it and never really shoves you down it. Instead, you're left with an open world that has landmarks and locations that call out to you. There will be a shrine in the distance with the promise of a new puzzle. You'll see a tall mountain that teases you with the challenge of climbing it. And, of course, like I alluded to before, the ever-present and almost always visible Hyrule Castle serves as a reminder that if you ever decide to, you can change your course, drop everything, and say, enough is enough, before running off to fight the final challenge. However, the existence of these things is only one half of Breath of the Wild's success. These focal points can capture our attention and give us something to strive towards. They give us a destination to push at through all the rain and monsters and sweat. But these destinations are largely secondary to the journey. Game designer Clint Hawking, who's known for Far Cry 2 and the Splinter Cell series, coined the term dynamics during a GDC talk in 2011. It refers to a meaning of mechanics and systems that creates meaningful play. And when I say that out loud, that sounds like the most vapid and empty game designer term, so let me explain it a little bit more. It's not just emergent gameplay, where intersecting systems can create moments that surprise or amuse the player. For instance, a dragon swooping down while the Stormcloaks and Imperials are fighting in Skyrim. That's emergent, but it's not necessarily dynamic. Dynamics are the puzzle pieces that give us meaning. They allow us to imbue the game world with a sense of order and intentionality. For instance, in Breath of the Wild, we might come across a broken down cabin, covered in arrows and crumbling after years of neglect. And we'll walk further down a path to find a large skeleton in the dirt, covered with the dust of years gone by. And a narrative begins to form in our brain about an epic last stand against a giant beast. And we think about that until, as if out of nowhere, a merchant arrives, and they turn out to be an assassin in disguise. And we might ask ourselves, after we defeat them, what drew them here? Why this place? And we can come to any number of conclusions. Maybe this is where they come to sharpen their assassin tools against the bones of a fallen skeleton. Maybe that shack was their home and they're remembering a life before they turned to evil. Or maybe they just found us in the middle of absolutely nowhere. These stories can happen all the time. You might spot a magical creature in the jungle and dash after it only to find a deposit of rare minerals. And you'll ask yourself, were they mischievously guiding me here, or were they being drawn to just another source of magic themselves? You'll walk in a valley and you'll come across a circle of stones, and when you walk into the center, you'll have the shadow of a cloud pass overhead, and you'll ask, did I just disturb some long-quieted spirits by entering the circle? And it's up to you to decide what's happening. Of course, the boring answer, and the maybe even true answer, is that none of these things are really happening. not insofar as the designers of the games intentionally placed these assets where they were found in order to make us have these sorts of epiphanies. Rather, the dynamics of interplaying systems and the lush world that they created allowed us to give the world meaning and imbue these otherwise meaningless or senseless moments with some sort of purpose. In general, human beings like when things make sense. Breath of the Wild's scale demands an excess of travel, which means that there's also an excess of opportunity for meaningful and dynamic interactions to occur. Additionally, the large time committed to traversal also establishes a clear tone by allowing players to reflect on the things that they saw. It's somber and quiet. I've spoken in another video about how some of the most important moments in video game combat are the moments where we pause to reset and take no real action. Breath of the Wild's world structure functions in a really similar fashion, providing suitable punctuation marks on our journey while offering extended periods where the world can reset before the next big surprise or revelation. And let's be clear, Breath of the Wild is full of surprises, and the powerful thing about them is that they can vary in scale and intensity while still having equally profound effects. The first time I encountered a rock monster, it was this terrible thing where I was desperate and really surprised, and it went, well, just look at the footage. To see if we can't find a nearby tower. Oh shit, that's a monster. Oh shit. Yeah, geez. But the second time I encountered a rock monster, it was very different. Maybe 10 hours of travel later, I came across a still pond where a bunch of horses had gathered. I had no real intention of stealing one of these horses to make them my own, but I did want to get closer to see if maybe I could go into my inventory and take some of the apples that I found and drop them on the ground to see if the horses might eat them. And so slowly and quietly, I slinked through the grass and made my way closer and closer to the horses until I passed a rock that suddenly leapt to life and scared them off. And the rock was much smaller this time. It was a different scale and a different intensity, but both moments were equally as magical. To explain this in really great terms, let me tell you another story. I decided I wanted to go to Death Mountain, largely because I wanted to see the Gorons. I think they're really cool. Also, Death Mountain is just there. It's like Everest, right? You have to climb to the top of it. And so on my way there, I came across a canyon, and at the bottom of this canyon, I saw that there were slabs of stone. And I thought it was curious, so I jumped down, pulled out my hang glider, and slowly listed towards the base of the canyon until I saw off to the side a sort of crack in the wall. And I moved closer to that crack and I looked inside, and there was a temple, some sort of old ancient space, full of guardians, which are these mechanical creatures that were initially made to fight off Ganon, but he sort of turned evil, and I needed to know what was inside. I go inside, and I'm moving past all of these super dangerous guardians and their death lasers, and I think to myself, well, at the end of this, there has to be some amazing puzzle, or maybe I found the entrance to one of the game's dungeons. But instead, at the end, I found a shrine, and I entered, thinking that there might be a puzzle, but when I entered, the voice in the shrine told me that I had already proven my worth by getting there in the first place. There wasn't a grand puzzle or a giant boss fight. There was no large, meaningful thing waiting for me. Just an empty shrine with a sword, if I wanted it, and the acknowledgement that my journey had made me a better hero. The looser structure of Breath of the Wild encourages exploration and forces players to turn inwards. It doesn't hedge bets on video gamey moments of really goofy emergence or drag players along a heavily curated narrative. Instead, long and extended travel time gives rise to moments that dynamically cultivate meaning and generate a sense of wonder in the player. And because of this, the joy of Breath of the Wild is not slaying a dragon. It's being reminded, through a strange and ribbon-like dancing figure sailing on the sky, that dragons exist to begin with.